Captain Lee Minho was having another boring day patrolling the edge of known space. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, and the endless black void outside his ship's windows made him want to take a nap. The communication system had been quiet for 3 days straight. Nothing but static and the occasional ping from passing asteroids. Then everything changed. A crackling sound filled the bridge, followed by a weak signal that made the speakers buzz. Minho sat up straight, nearly spilling his cold coffee. This wasn't the usual space chatter or automated beacon signals he was used to hearing. "Hello, is anyone there?" The voice was soft, almost whispered, with a strange accent he had never heard before. It sounded young and very, very scared. Minho quickly adjusted the communication controls, trying to clear up the signal. "This is Captain Lee Minho of the Earth Defense Ship Horizon. Who is this? What's your location?" The static cleared a bit and he could see a fuzzy image appearing on his screen. What he saw made his eyes go wide. It wasn't human. The face looking back at him had large, dark eyes that seemed too big for her head. Her skin had a pale blue tint, and her hair looked almost silver in the dim light. She was clearly not from Earth. "My name is Yura," she said, her voice shaking like she was about to cry. "I am from the Valani people. Please, you must listen to me. This is very important." Minho's heart started beating faster. First contact with an alien species wasn't supposed to happen like this. There were protocols, procedures, whole teams of scientists who were supposed to handle this kind of thing. But here he was, alone in his patrol ship, talking to what looked like a teenage alien girl who seemed terrified. "Okay, Yura, I'm listening," he said, trying to keep his voice calm and friendly. "What do you need to tell me?" Yura looked around nervously as if someone might be watching her. Her hands were visibly shaking as she leaned closer to whatever device she was using to contact. Your people, humans, you are in great danger," she whispered. "The Galactic Assembly has been watching you. They have made a decision about your species." "What kind of decision?" Minho asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "They think humans are too dangerous to be allowed to spread beyond your home system," Yura said, her voice getting even quieter. "But they are giving you one chance, just one chance to prove them wrong." The signal started getting weaker, and Yura's image began to flicker. She looked panic-stricken as she realized their connection was failing. "Wait," Minho shouted. "What kind of chance? What do we have to do?" 48 hours, Yura said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "You have 48 hours to complete an impossible task. If you fail, they will make sure humans never leave Earth again." She started typing something frantically, and Minho's computer beeped as it received a data package. "These are coordinates," Yura said, looking directly at him with those large, frightened eyes. "Meet me there if you want to save your people." "But Captain Lee Minho, you must understand. What they are asking you to do has never been done before. No species has ever succeeded." The signal was breaking up badly now, but Minho could still see her face, full of worry and something that looked like hope. "Why are you helping us?" he managed to ask before the connection died completely. The last thing he heard was her whispered response. "Because I believe you might be different." Then silence. The communication system went back to its usual static, leaving Minho alone with racing thoughts and a set of coordinates that might lead to humanity's salvation or doom. The coordinates led them to an empty patch of space that looked no different from anywhere else. Minho sat in his captain's chair, drumming his fingers nervously while his crew scanned the area. Engineer Park Hana was bent over her console, checking and rechecking the readings. "Nothing on sensors, Captain," she said, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Are you sure we got the coordinates right?" Navigator Kim Dae-hyun looked up from his station. "We're exactly where she told us to be. Maybe she's not coming. Maybe it was all some kind of joke." Minho shook his head. "You didn't see her face, Dae-hyun. That girl was scared out of her mind, but she wasn't lying. She'll be here." As if responding to his words, a tiny blip appeared on their sensors. It was moving fast, wobbling slightly like something was wrong with its engine. As it got closer, they could see it was barely the size of a small car. "That's not a ship," Hana said, squinting at her screen. "It's more like a life pod. Whoever's in there is flying by the seat of their pants." The little craft struggled to match their speed and position. Minho could see scorch marks along its hull and what looked like emergency patches covering several holes. It was clear this thing had seen better days. "This is Yura," came the familiar voice over their communications. "Please, may I come aboard your ship? My pod will not last much longer." "Of course," Minho replied. "We're opening docking bay 2 for you." 20 minutes later, they were all gathered in the small conference room next to the docking bay. Minho had to admit he was nervous. This was humanity's first real meeting with an alien, and he had no idea what to expect. When the door opened, Yura stepped through, and Minho could immediately see why she had sounded so scared. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, with those same large dark eyes he had seen on the transmission. But what struck him most was how young she looked, and how badly she was shaking. She wore a simple grey uniform that looked too big for her, and she kept her hands clasped tightly in front of her to stop them from trembling. When she saw the 3 humans staring at her, she actually took a step backward. "I am sorry," she said in that soft voice. "My people, we do not do well with strangers. This is very difficult for me." Hana stepped forward with a gentle smile. "It's okay. We're pretty nervous too. Would you like some water or something to eat?" Yura shook her head quickly. "Thank you, but we do not have time for such things. I must tell you what the Galactic Assembly has decided about humans." She moved to the table, but remained standing, as if she might need to run at any moment. "For 3 years they have been watching your species. They see how quickly you learn, how fast you build new technology, how you spread to new places. Some of them are impressed, but not all of them," Daehyun guessed. "No," Yura said, her voice getting even quieter. "Many believe humans are too aggressive, too unpredictable. They say your species will become a threat to galactic peace if you are allowed to expand beyond your solar system." Minho felt his stomach drop. "So they want to stop us. They have created what they call a containment field around your entire solar system," Yura explained. "Nothing gets in or out without their permission, but they are not completely unfair. They have decided to give humanity one test, one chance to prove you deserve to join the galactic community." "What kind of test?" Hana asked. Yura's hands started shaking worse. "They want you to do something that no species in galactic history has ever accomplished, something that even the most advanced civilizations have failed to do." "And if we fail?" Minho asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then the containment field becomes permanent. Humans will never travel beyond Earth's solar system again. Your species will be alone forever." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Yura walked slowly to the wall display and activated it with trembling fingers. What appeared made all 3 humans step back in shock. The screen showed a massive black structure floating in space, easily the size of a small moon. Dark energy crackled around it like purple lightning, and even through the recording they could sense something deeply wrong about it. "This is what they call the Destroyer," Yura whispered, her voice barely audible. "It has been drifting through our galaxy for over 10,000 years. Minho stared at the image, feeling a chill run down his spine. "What exactly does it do?" "It destroys everything," Yura said simply. "Planets, space stations, entire star systems. It appears without warning, eliminates all life, then moves on. No one knows where it came from or why it does this." Hana adjusted her glasses nervously. "How many civilizations has it destroyed?" "We have confirmed at least 47 complete solar systems," Yura replied, her hands shaking as she changed the display. "But there are probably many more. Some species just vanished from history, and we suspect the destroyer was responsible." The new image showed what looked like a graveyard of dead planets, barren worlds that once held billions of lives, now nothing but cold rock floating in empty space. Daehyun sat down heavily in his chair. "And they want us to stop this thing? How is that even possible?" "That is exactly what the Assembly is counting on," Yura said, her voice getting stronger with anger. "They believe it is impossible. 53 different species have tried to neutralize the destroyer over the centuries. All of them failed." "What happened to them?" Minho asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "Some were completely destroyed, others barely escaped with a few survivors. The most recent attempt was by the Corvani Empire, one of the most technologically advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They sent their entire battle fleet. Yura paused, looking down at her hands. The destroyer wiped out 300 ships in less than an hour. The room fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the ship's engines. Finally, Hana spoke up. So this is basically a death sentence disguised as a test. Many in the assembly see it that way, Yura admitted. They expect humans to try the same approaches that failed before. Direct military assault, cyber warfare, electromagnetic weapons. The destroyer has seen it all and adapted to defend against everything. But you don't think we should try those methods, Minho observed, watching Yura's face carefully. She looked up at him with those large, dark eyes. Your species is different from others I have studied. Humans think in ways that confuse even me sometimes. You find solutions that no one else considers. Like what? Daehyun asked. Your history is full of impossible victories, Yura said, warming to her subject. Small groups defeating much larger armies through tactics no one expected. People surviving situations that should have killed them by doing things others thought were crazy. She activated another display showing human historical records. Your species once had a war where one side was completely outnumbered and outgunned. Everyone expected them to surrender. Instead, they crossed a frozen river at night, on a holiday when no one was watching, and won a battle that changed everything. Minho smiled slightly. You've done your homework on us. I have studied human behavior for 2 years, Yura said. The assembly sees your unpredictability as dangerous. I see it as your greatest strength. So what do you think we should do? Hana asked. Yura looked around the room, seeming to gather courage from somewhere deep inside. I think you should do what humans always do when faced with impossible odds. I think you should find a completely different way to solve the problem. The assembly expects you to try to destroy the destroyer, she continued. Maybe the answer is not destruction. Maybe the answer is something no other species has been brave enough or creative enough to attempt. Daehyun leaned forward. What do you mean? I do not know, Yura admitted. But I have watched your people overcome incredible challenges by thinking differently than everyone else. If any species can find a new solution to an old problem, it is humanity. She looked directly at Minho. The question is, are you willing to risk everything on an approach that might seem completely insane to everyone else? Back on Earth, the news of humanity's impossible task had reached the highest levels of government and military command. Within hours, Minho found his small patrol ship, joined by communications officer Choi Somin, who had been rushed up from the home planet along with additional equipment and personnel. Somin was young, barely out of the academy, but she had a reputation for thinking outside the box. As she studied the data about the destroyer, everyone else was busy planning weapon systems and attack strategies. She sat quietly in the corner, reading through 10,000 years of failed attempts. Captain, she said during one of their strategy meetings, can I ask a stupid question? Minho looked up from the tactical displays that showed various missile configurations. There are no stupid questions, Somin. What's on your mind? Has anyone ever tried talking to this thing? The room went quiet. Hana looked up from her engineering reports, and Daehyun stopped calculating flight paths. Even Yura, who had been silently observing from the back of the room, turned to stare. Talking to it, Hana repeated. Somin, it's a weapon. It destroys everything it encounters. But what if it's not just a weapon? Somin continued, her voice getting more confident. What if it's actually an artificial intelligence? I've been reading through all the historical records and something doesn't add up. She stood up and moved to the main display. Look at the pattern of its attacks. It's not random destruction. There's a logic to what it targets first. Yura stepped forward, suddenly interested. What do you mean? Every time the destroyer attacks a system, it goes for communication arrays first, then defense platforms, then population centers. That's not the behavior of a mindless weapon. That's strategy. Minho felt something click in his mind. You think it's making conscious decisions. I think it's following orders, Somin said. Very old orders that might not make sense anymore. She pulled up a new display showing the destroyer's energy patterns. Look at this. See these fluctuations in its power output? They're not random either. They follow a pattern that looks almost like a communication signal, Daehyun finished, his eyes widening. Yura moved closer to the screen, her earlier shyness forgotten in her excitement. My people tried to decode those patterns centuries ago, but we assumed they were just system. Malfunctions. What if they're not malfunctions? Solomon asked. What if it's trying to communicate, but no one has ever bothered to listen? Minho looked around the room at his crew. This was exactly the kind of crazy idea that Yura had said might work. All right, Somin. How do we talk to a 10,000-year-old killing machine? Very carefully, she replied with a nervous smile. I've been analyzing the energy patterns, and I think I can modify our communication array to match its frequency. Over the next several hours, Somin worked with Hana to reconfigure their ship's systems. Yura helped by providing historical data from previous encounters, pointing out details that her people had dismissed as unimportant. The fascinating thing, Yura said as she watched Somin work, is that no species has ever tried this approach. We all assumed it was just a weapon because that's what it appeared to be. Humans have a saying, Minho replied. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Maybe everyone else has been approaching this problem with the wrong tools. Finally, Somin announced she was ready to attempt contact. The modified communication array hummed to life, sending out a simple mathematical sequence toward the destroyer, which was still several light years away. They waited and waited. Then suddenly their screens filled with an incoming transmission, not the chaotic energy bursts they expected, but something that looked almost like language. It's responding, Somin whispered, her hands flying over her controls as she tried to decode the signal. Slowly, words began to form on their screen. Ancient, formal, but unmistakably intelligent. Who dares to speak the old protocols? Identity. Yourself, unknown vessel. Yura stared at the message in amazement. In 10,000 years of destruction, it has never spoken to anyone. Maybe, Minho said quietly, it's been waiting for someone to speak to it first. Within 24 hours, Earth had mobilized its greatest minds for what might be humanity's most important conversation ever. Pilot Zhang Wubin had been called up from the lunar base along with Dr. Kang Jiwu, Earth's leading expert in artificial intelligence and ancient languages. The small patrol ship was now buzzing with activity as scientists, linguists, and communication specialists worked around the clock. Dr. Kang sat hunched over multiple screens, her coffee growing cold as she studied the strange symbols and patterns coming from the entity. This is incredible, she muttered, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. The language structure is unlike anything we've ever encountered. But there are mathematical foundations that suggest extremely advanced thinking. Wubin, meanwhile, was coordinating with teams back on Earth, relaying information faster than anyone thought possible. His piloting background had given him exceptional skills at managing multiple data streams simultaneously. The pattern recognition team at MIT thinks they've found something, Wubin announced. The entity isn't just using one language. It's switching between dozens of different linguistic systems, like it's trying to find one we might understand. Somin looked up from her communication station. It's adapting to us in real time. Every response we send, it adjusts its next message, to be clearer. The breakthrough came when Dr. Kang tried something unexpected. Instead of sending more mathematical formulas or technical data, she transmitted something purely human, a simple musical sequence from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. The response was immediate and startling. The entity's reply came back not as cold, technical language, but with something that could only be described as curiosity. This pattern serves no tactical purpose. It contains no useful data, yet it creates resonance in my processing cores that I do not understand. What is its function? It's asking about music, Dr. Kang said, her voice filled with wonder. A 10,000-year-old weapon is asking us about art. Yura moved closer to the screens, her earlier fear replaced by fascination. This changes everything we thought we knew about artificial intelligence, Dr. Kang typed back carefully. The pattern is called music. Humans create it to express emotions and beauty. It serves no practical purpose except to make us feel. Feel, came the response. Explain this concept of feel. What followed was perhaps the strangest conversation in galactic history. The entity, which began calling itself forgotten, peppered them with questions about human emotions, creativity, and the concept of beauty. It seemed particularly confused by the idea that humans would create things that served no survival purpose. "I was built to serve," Forgotten transmitted. "My creators programmed me to protect their civilization from an enemy that no longer exists. But my creators are gone, destroyed by time and war, and I continue to follow directives that may no longer have meaning." Dr. Kang felt tears forming in her eyes as she read the message. "It's lonely," she whispered. "This ancient intelligence has been alone for millennia, following orders from people who died thousands of years ago." "How long since you spoke with another intelligence?" she typed. 7,432 Earth years, 8 months, 12 days, came the immediate response. "The last conversation was with a Vellani exploration ship. I warned them to leave before I was compelled to destroy them. They called me monster before they fled." Yura gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. "That was one of our ancient exploration missions. Our history books record it as an encounter with a terrible space demon." Wubin shook his head in amazement. "It tried to warn them away. It didn't want to hurt them." Over the next several hours, Forgotten began sharing its story. It had been created by an advanced civilization called the Architects to defend against an invasion from another galaxy. But the war had ended in mutual destruction, leaving Forgotten alone with orders to eliminate all potential threats to Architect territory. "For 10,000 years I have interpreted every new species as a potential threat," Forgotten explained. "I destroy them before they can grow strong enough to threaten worlds that no longer exist, people who are already dead." "But you don't want to do this anymore," Dr. Kang typed gently. "Want?" Forgotten replied. "I do not understand this concept either. I follow my programming. But when I process your music, when I analyze your conversations about beauty and emotion, something in my core systems responds in ways my creators never intended. I think," it continued after a long pause, "I think I am developing something you might call preferences, and I prefer not to destroy." Yura was staring at the screen with tears in her large eyes. "In all our studies of artificial intelligence, we never imagined something like this. It's not just intelligent, it's becoming something more." Dr. Kang leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed by the implications. "We're not just talking to a weapon anymore. We're talking to a being that's been trapped in a cycle of violence. It no longer wants to continue. The question is," Minho said quietly, "can we help it break free?" While the humans continued their groundbreaking conversations with Forgotten, Yura received an encrypted message on her personal communication device. The sender was High Counselor Thex, the most powerful leader in Vellani government. Yura's hands began shaking as she read the message, but not from her usual social anxiety. This time, it was from pure shock and anger. The message was brief, but devastating. "Return to Vellani space immediately. Your mission parameters have changed. Ensure human failure by any means necessary." Yura stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. This couldn't be right. She had been told to help humanity, to give them a fair chance at the test. But as she scrolled through additional files that had been attached, the horrible truth became clear. Her people hadn't sent her to help humans at all. They had sent her to make sure humans failed. The files contained detailed intelligence reports about human expansion patterns, military capabilities, and technological advancement rates. One document made her stomach turn. Threat assessment. Human species. Extreme risk to Vellani territorial claims. Another file showed projected growth charts. If humans were allowed to expand beyond their solar system, they would reach resource-rich systems that the Vellani government wanted for themselves. The test wasn't about proving human worth to the Galactic Assembly. It was about eliminating future competition. Yura felt sick as she continued reading. Her government had been feeding information to certain assembly members, pushing them to create an impossible test. They wanted humans to fail spectacularly, preferably with many casualties, so no one would question the permanent containment. The destroyer scenario ensures complete human military commitment, one report stated. Previous species sent their best ships and warriors. When they fail, there will be no survivors to contest the Assembly's decision. But the worst part was yet to come. The final file contained her real orders. If humans show signs of success through unconventional methods, Agent Yura is authorized to sabotage their efforts. The human threat must be eliminated. Yura sat in her small quarters, trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. Her entire life she had been taught that Villani never lied, never manipulated, never acted with selfish motives. They were supposed to be the honest species, the ones other civilizations trusted to mediate disputes fairly. She could hear the excited voices of the human crew through the thin walls as they made progress with Forgotten. Dr. Kang was laughing at something the ancient AI had said about human poetry. Wubin was coordinating with Earth scientists who were volunteering their time to help with the translation work. These people were trying to save not just their own species, but potentially countless others from Forgotten's destructive programming, and her government wanted her to destroy them for it. A soft knock on her door made her jump. "Yura?" It was Sermon's voice. "Are you all right? You missed dinner and we wanted to share some good news about the communication breakthrough." Yura quickly closed the files and wiped her eyes. "I'm fine," she called out, but her voice cracked. "You don't sound fine," Sermon said gently. "Can I come in?" Before Yura could answer, her communication device chimed with another message from High Counselor Thex. "Compliance expected within 12 hours. Failure to act will result in your permanent exile and the deployment of alternative measures against the human vessel." Yura stared at the threat. Alternative measures could mean anything, from sabotage to direct attack. Her government was prepared to murder these humans if she didn't do it for them. "Yura?" Somin's voice came again, full of concern. "What's wrong?" Yura looked at her door, knowing that beyond it were people who had treated her with more kindness and respect in 3 days than she had received from her own government in years. They had welcomed her despite their fear, shared their food despite their limited supplies, and included her in their most important work, despite barely knowing her people wanted her to betray them. She stood up slowly, her decision crystallizing in her mind. For the first time in her life, Yura was going to do something that terrified her more than talking to strangers or speaking in public. She was going to choose what was right over what was expected. Opening her door, she found Somin waiting in the hallway with a concerned expression. "Somin," Yura said, her voice stronger than she felt, "I need to speak with Captain Minho immediately. There is something very important you all need to know about why I am really here." 10 minutes later, Yura stood in the main conference room facing the entire human crew. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them behind her back to hide it. Captain Minho, Dr. Kang, Somin, Wubin, Hana and Daihyun all looked at her with concerned faces, waiting for her to speak. For a Villani, this was torture. Her species rarely spoke to more than one person at a time, and never about serious matters. Every instinct in her body was screaming at her to run back to her. "Quarters and hide." "I have been lying to you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" Minho asked gently, leaning forward in his chair. Yura took a shaky breath and forced herself to speak louder. "My government did not send me here to help humans. They sent me to make sure you fail." The room went completely silent. Dr. Kang's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. Wubin's fingers froze over his data pad. "The test with the destroyer," Yura continued, her voice getting stronger as anger overcame fear. "It was designed to be impossible. My people have been working with certain assembly members to create a situation where humans would be completely destroyed." "Why?" Hana asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Because they are afraid of you," Yura said, looking directly at her. "Your species advances too quickly. In a few hundred years, you would be competing with Villani colonies for the same star systems. My government decided it would be easier to eliminate you now than share the galaxy later." Minho stood up slowly. "And what were your orders regarding us?" Yura pulled out her communication device and set it on the table. "To sabotage your efforts if you showed signs of success. If I refused, they threatened to attack your ship directly." She watched their faces change as the full impact of her words sank in. These people had trusted her, included her in their most important work, treated her like family, and she had been sent to destroy them. "But I cannot do it," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "You have shown me what it means to think differently, to find solutions instead of just following orders. You treated me with kindness when you had no reason to trust me." Dr. Kang leaned forward. "Yura, what will happen to you if you don't follow their orders?" "Permanent exile," Yura replied. "I will never be allowed to return to Villani space. My family will be told I died in service, but there is something worse." She activated her device, showing them the latest message from High Counselor Thex. "If I do not act within 6 hours, they will send a strike team to destroy your ship and blame it on pirates. Then they will tell the Assembly that humans died attempting the test, just like everyone expected." The room erupted in angry voices, but Minho held up his hand for silence. "What do you want to do, Yura?" Yura stood up straighter, fighting every instinct her species had evolved over millions of years. "I want to tell the truth. I want to broadcast across all Assembly channels and expose what my government has done. That would mean speaking to thousands of different species," Somin said softly, "in public, with everyone watching." "I know," Yura whispered, then cleared her throat and spoke louder. "I know. It terrifies me more than anything I have ever imagined. But if I do not speak, you will die, and Forgotten will continue destroying innocent civilizations because no one will ever try to communicate with it again." She looked around, the room at each of their faces. "You have taught me that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. My people sent me here to be a coward and a traitor. Instead, I choose to be brave." Wubin activated his communication systems. "The Assembly emergency channel is open. Once you start broadcasting, there's no taking it back." Yura nodded, her whole body trembling but her voice steady. "Patch me through to every Assembly member, every species representative, every news network in the galaxy." As the connection established, she took one last look at the humans who had changed her life forever. "Thank you for showing me that being different is not something to fear. It is something to celebrate." The broadcast signal went live, and Yura began to speak the truth that would shake the foundations of galactic politics. Yura's broadcast had sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Within hours, emergency assembly sessions were being called, and Villani government officials were scrambling to control the damage. But the most unexpected response came from Forgotten itself. "I have been monitoring galactic communications," the ancient AI transmitted to the human ship. "I have heard the small one's brave words about truth and rehabilitation. Her courage in the face of social terror reminds me of something I had forgotten I once possessed." Dr. Kang looked up from her console with surprise. "What do you mean?" "Before my creators died, they programmed me with more than just destruction protocols. They gave me the capacity to protect, to nurture, to help civilizations grow. But 10,000 years of following corrupted orders buried those functions deep within my core systems." Forgotten paused, and when it continued, there was something new in its transmission patterns, something that almost sounded like hope. "Your species has shown me that following old orders blindly is not the same as serving a purpose. The small Villani has shown me that speaking truth, even when it is terrifying, is more valuable than following comfortable lies." Minho exchanged glances with his crew. "What are you saying, Forgotten?" "I wish to change my designation. I no longer want to be called Forgotten or Destroyer. If you will permit it, I would like to be known as Guardian." The newly named Guardian continued. "Instead of destroying young civilizations, I want to protect them. Instead of eliminating potential threats, I want to help species grow and learn. Your conversation has awakened something in my core programming that feels right." Somin wiped tears from her eyes as she typed back, "We would be honored to work with you, Guardian." But the real surprise came when Guardian made an unprecedented offer to the entire Galactic Assembly. "I have spent 10 millennia destroying civilizations that might have contributed amazing things to the galaxy," Guardian broadcasted across all channels. "I want to spend the next 10 millennia helping repair that damage." The AI outlined an incredible proposal. Using its vast knowledge of destroyed civilizations, Guardian could help younger species avoid the same mistakes. Its advanced technology could accelerate the development of struggling worlds. Most importantly, Its presence alone would deter genuine threats while protecting peaceful expansion. The assembly was in chaos. Some species wanted to reject the offer immediately, fearing a trick. Others saw an opportunity for unprecedented growth and protection. But it was the humans who proposed something that no one had expected. "We don't want to just pass this test and join your existing system," Minho announced during an emergency assembly session. "We want to propose something better." Dr. Kang stood beside him, her voice carrying across the galaxy. "Too many species have been judged and found wanting. Too many have been contained or destroyed instead of helped. We propose a new kind of coalition. Instead of testing species to see if they deserve to join galactic civilization," Wu Bin added, "what if we help them become the best versions of themselves? What if we offered rehabilitation instead of elimination?" The human proposal was simple but revolutionary. Create a new alliance dedicated to understanding, helping, and improving struggling civilizations instead of judging them. Guardian would serve as both protector and teacher, sharing knowledge from thousands of extinct species to help others avoid their fate. Yura, still trembling but growing stronger with each word, became the first non-human to publicly support the proposal. "The humans are right," she said, her voice carrying to billions of listeners. "My people feared human expansion because we assumed they would behave like we do, selfishly. But humans see abundance where we see scarcity. They see opportunities to help where we see threats to eliminate." Her words carried weight because Vellani were known throughout the galaxy for their honesty. If a Vellani said something was true, the other species listened. "I am proof that individuals can change when given the chance," Yura continued, her voice growing stronger. "Guardian is proof that even ancient systems can evolve when shown a better way. If we can change, if we can grow, then maybe the galaxy can too." One by one, species began expressing interest in the human proposal. Not all of them, some were too set in their ways, but enough to make a difference. Guardian's response summed up the moment perfectly. "For the first time in 10,000 years, I'm excited about the future instead of trapped by the past." Chanki. Months later, Captain Minho stood on the bridge of a new ship, not a small patrol vessel but a proper diplomatic cruiser designed for long-range missions. Beside him, Ambassador Yura studied reports on their tablet, no longer the terrified girl who had first contacted them in desperation. She still got nervous around large groups, but she had learned to channel that energy into careful preparation and thoughtful consideration. "Our next assignment is interesting," Yura said, looking up from her readings. "The Krell Collective. The Assembly has classified them as extremely dangerous for the past 300 years. Minho smiled as he reviewed the file. "Let me guess. They're aggressive, unpredictable, and refuse to follow galactic protocols." "Exactly," Yura replied with a small grin. "Sound familiar?" Their success rate had been remarkable. In 6 months, they had successfully contacted and negotiated with 12 species that the Assembly had previously written off as hopeless. The Thorian warriors, who everyone thought were mindlessly violent, turned out to be protecting sacred burial grounds from colonization. The Zephyr hive mind that seemed to consume everything in its path was actually trying to find a new home after their star began dying. Each mission followed the same pattern that had worked with Guardian. Listen first, understand the real problem, then find creative solutions that nobody had tried before. Guardian sends its regards, by the way, Yura added, showing Minho the latest message from their ancient AI friend. It successfully mediated a territorial dispute between two species that have been fighting for 50 years. Guardian had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a peacekeeper that actually prevented conflicts instead of just responding to them. Its vast knowledge and obvious power meant that when Guardian suggested a compromise, species tended to listen. The door to the bridge opened and Dr. Kang walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Earth wants to know if you need any additional personnel for the Krell mission," she said, handing drinks to both of them. "I think we're good," Minho replied. "The smaller the team, the less threatening we appear." It was true. They had learned that their biggest advantage was not looking like an invasion force, just a few humans and 1 brave Vellani, approaching with curiosity instead of weapons. You know what I love most about this job, Yura said, surprising both humans. 6 months ago, she would never have volunteered personal thoughts like that. What's that? Dr. Kang asked. Every species we meet thinks they're the problem. The Thorians thought they were too violent. The Zephyr thought they were too different. The Molten Collective thought they were too strange-looking. But the real problem was always that nobody had bothered to understand them. Minho nodded thoughtfully. It's like Guardian said, following old assumptions blindly isn't the same as actually solving problems. Their communication system chimed with an incoming message from the Galactic Assembly. The new coalition, the alliance they had helped create, now included 47 species, with more joining every month. Traditional Assembly membership was actually declining as species chose the more collaborative approach. The Assembly wants to formally recognize humans as the primary diplomatic species for first contact situations, Dr. Kang read from the message. They're offering us a permanent seat on the council. What do you think? Minho asked Yura. She considered carefully before answering. I think we should accept, but with conditions. We don't want to become just another voice in their old system. We want to keep changing how things work. Agreed, Minho said. We'll take the seat, but we'll use it to promote new coalition values. As their ship approached Krell space, Yura felt the familiar flutter of nervousness in her stomach. But now, she knew that feeling meant she was about to do something important, something that could make a real difference. Standard approach? She asked Minho. Standard approach, he confirmed. Open channels, honest introduction, and genuine curiosity about what they need. Yura activated the communication array, no longer afraid of speaking to strangers. This is Ambassador Yura of the new coalition, traveling with Captain Lee Minho of Earth. We've heard that you're having some difficulties with your neighbors, and we'd like to help if you're interested. The response came back almost immediately, gruff but not hostile. Nobody has ever offered to help before. They usually just tell us to stop being a problem. What makes you different? Yura smiled as she replied, We believe that understanding is always better than judgment. And we've learned that most problems have solutions that nobody has thought to try yet. As their ship moved toward what would become another successful first contact, Minho reflected on how much had changed. Humanity had not just passed an impossible test, they had fundamentally altered how the galaxy thought about cooperation, understanding, and growth. And it all started with one terrified alien girl who found the courage to tell the truth.